we'll talk about methods. Now, as you have seen, we have created a struct and we know how to access its elements. We know how to manipulate its elements, update its elements, print the contents of the struct. We have also created different functions and tried to pass the object into the function. So why we cannot embed these functions, a standard set of functions for a particular struct along with it so that it can be called easily. Okay. Now this is where we talk about the object-oriented program approach in Rust. That is here, as you can see, I am going to put the area function inside an IMPL rectangle. Now what is IMPL? IMPL means implement the rectangle. So implement struct. Now this contains the methods that are relevant to the particular struct. Now you can take it as an example, like a rectangle would have different kinds of functions. The first one could be the area. The second one could be the perimeter. What about the third one? The third one could be the length of diagonal. You can have different entities and different functions defined for the particular struct rectangle. So rectangle will have a particular set of functions, right? Now let's imagine. So what if you require multiple area functions? So you require a function area to find the area of a rectangle, find the area of circle, find the area of a trapezium or etc etc. But you cannot give the same name to different functions, right? That would give an error. So same name to different functions is not possible. So what we come up with is to create an IMPL that is specifically created for the particular struct. So the area function inside the IMPL of rectangle only finds the area for the rectangle. Okay, you can also create an IMPL function for circle as well. Now we'll see what happens in a demo. So in the methods, see, I've created a struct rectangle width, height, and then I use the IMPL. Similar, like this function is just the same function that we have used in the previous session, but I just pushed it into an IMPL rectangle. Now, what is this IMPL rectangle? This actually defines the methods that are specifically created for this particular struct. Now, there is some differences in the parameters that you need to concentrate. Uh, for those who are literally new into object-oriented programming, make sure you get the ideas clear and you need to try out more examples to get the idea of object-oriented programming into your mind. Okay, it's all about creating objects, some methods related to objects, and then using those methods to manipulate those objects so we can create abstraction and all these things. So yeah, for those who know it, it should be easy, but for those who don't know, try to cope up and try to understand. Okay, so we have used the and self here rather than the and rectangle. Why? Because as I mentioned before, the function is specifically created for the struct rectangle. So we are only defining those functions that are relevant to rectangle only. So the area should only call the and self because the self here represents the struct rectangle. Okay, the struct rectangle is what the self means. The idea is clear, I guess so. So the self here means and rectangle. Okay. Now, why are we using the and? Because we are going to take an input as the reference. As I mentioned before, we do not pass the entire struct into the function. Why? Because then we cannot take it back because we are passing the ownership. Now, we are not going to pass the ownership. Rather, we will pass the reference. So, as you can see, this and rectangle is changed to and self because self represents rectangle when you create an IMPL. Okay. Now it's the same function. Now let's see how you can. So I've also created a struct circle, created an IMPL that is area for the circle using 3.14 into self dot radius into self dot radius pi r square, right? Now I've created an object for the particular rectangle. So it's a variable RECT1 which is equal to rectangle with 30, height 50. Println the area of the rectangle is RECT1 dot area. Now this is something also more relevant. You can see RECT1 dot area. In the previous program, you can see I have passed area ampersand R. But right now, I created an object rectangle and RECT1 was the name of the variable. I am using a direct function like dot area. Now what this dot area do? Now it comes to the IMPL block. It searches for if there is a function named area. Then it checks for the parameters. The parameter is just and self. So it means take a reference of what is being added to the left of the function. The left of the function is the rectangle's object, right? So what it does is it takes the and rectangle as the parameter. Okay, I think the idea is clear. Basically what we do is we can use a dot area function to call the area function that is specified inside the IMPL block, that is defined for the self, that is and the self here is rectangle. Now you see I have created a circles variable c1 which takes the radius 25.0, and then I am calling the c1 dot area. Now what if I did not use the IMPL? If I did not use the IMPL, then I cannot define two functions with the same name area taking different parameters. Okay. So now with IMPL, it is possible. And using IMPLs actually standardizes the way we create a certain number of functions for the particular struct so that it is relevant to that struct. And this also makes sure that you are not going to pass any other kind of function into the struct, which is not relevant to it. Okay. So this means you can have every function that is relevant to a particular struct using the IMPL. Okay. I think the idea is clear. Now let's execute this program to see what happens. So CD session. I think taking the CD would be a hard task. You can see the output was the area of the rectangle is 1500 square pixels and the area of the circle is 1962.5. So what we did was we used an IMPL to define the function that is specific for the struct, and then we called it using this methodology, that is RACT1.area. So yeah, that is the idea of how to work with IMPL, how to work with object-oriented programming, and how to create and define structs and work with these kind of struct in Rust. It's similar, it's really similar to uh, Python, Java, etc., even C++. You might have seen a lot in like self and how to use the self dot width, self dot height, etc. If you are familiar with a programming language already. If not, take your time and try working out more and more examples using struct. Do it for fun, so you'd obviously learn it in the long run. Okay. So yeah, that was all about the methods. So unlike functions, methods are defined with the context of the struct and a more trait. Now, what is methods? So methods are actually these functions that are defined inside the particular struct. Now we have discussed all these things. We should pass the and self inside the functions to describe the inside the IMPL block to access the fields. Methods can take ownership of self, borrow of self immutably as you have done here. So the methods, if you just pass normally self, it takes the ownership of the uh, object that is passed. If you pass and self, it is taking the reference. And now these self and self cannot be used to actually change the components. Okay. So you require an and mute self in order to change the value or update the value of the object that needs to be passed. Okay. So you can use different ideas in here to change and to access the values of different objects. So that's the idea. If you wanted to change the instance that we have called the method on as a part of what the method does, then we would use an and mute self as the first parameter. And mute self in order to change the components of the object. It's a similar approach, so I did not want to go and take the example because it will be like same. You can see it's a similar example. I think should be good. Can hold is not very relevant. Yeah, now we have methods with more parameters. So now we have like, okay, we have passed the and self only. So that means it takes that particular object of the struct that has been created. What if you want to add some more parameters? Okay, so there could be scenarios where you want to add some more parameters. Like say, okay, I'm going to do this for real fun. I'm not going to think. The basic idea is we will just add, let's say, the number. Okay, say number is u8, and what I will do is now in the area you can use the number as 1. So this is my first rectangle, and I can say the number is okay. Now you cannot, okay, you cannot. So basically what I did was I just passed a number into this other. So what happens is the area function will initially take the and self component, that is the RECT1, and then it reads anything that has been input into the function. So now you have defined the number u8 here, right? You have defined the number u8. So what happens is this 1 is actually passed as a parameter against this number. Now you can use this number to do anything different with this. Okay, so I'm going to just multiply the number along with the value, and I'm going to return the product of self dot width dot self dot height dot number. Now what I will get? So I will not get the right rectangle area, but I would get the area multiplied by 1. Now this is not an issue because you would get the right answer again. What if we will just change it to 5? So if I change it to 5, the area of the rectangle, if let's say it's 10, then the answer that would be returned would be 10 times 5, right? I think the idea is clear. I just wanted to show how we can add additional parameters to a particular method that has been defined into a particular struct. So we use 5 and we access 5 here, and we use 5 to return the area. And let's see what happens. So you know the previous values, right? It was 1500 square pixels. And now let's see what happens after the compilation. Okay, there is an error. What is the error? Okay, it says cannot multiply u32 by u8. The number expected u32 found u8. Okay, so it needs to be u32. Okay, got it. Now let's run. Okay. So it's 7500. So before it was 1500, right? So we have multiplied the additional parameter that needs to be passed into the function. So that is how you can add any number of parameters into the method that needs to be defined. Okay. This is how you do it. Initially, you will pass the answer to take the object itself, and then you can use any number of parameters to take additional components and do anything as you require. That's the idea. I think you are clear with the methods with more number of parameters. We'll go to the third quiz. Regarding the methods, I think you got a good idea of methods. Now we'll see how much you understand the topic. I've started the quiz. You'll be given 1 minute and 30 seconds to answer the questions. I'll read out the questions for easiness. So the first question is state true or false. After object instantiation, we can call methods defined in the struct using the dot operator from the object. True and false were the options. The second question is state true or false. Methods can't take ownership of self, borrow self immutably, or borrow self mutably. So yeah, the first question was after object instantiation, we can call methods defined in the struct using the dot operator from the object. The right answer is true. 86% got it right. Good. The next question was methods can take ownership of self, borrow self immutably, or borrow self mutably. The answer is 58% got it right. The answer is false because methods can take ownership of anything that needs to be passed into the string as a parameter. Okay.